So, okay, everybody's hearing?
I can hear, yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today we have the pleasure to receive Dr. Knut Olsen as the speaker of our weekly webinar. Dr. Knut Olsen works at the National Optical Astronomy Observatory in Tucson, Arizona, and he's also the team leader of the NOAO Data Lab project. One of his main research interests is to use observations of resolved stellar populations in nearby galaxies to understand how galaxies form and evolve. And today, he's going to talk about preparing for Milky Way and local volume science with LSST. So, Dr. Knut Olsen, so thank you very much for accepting our invitation to give this webinar. It's really a pleasure to have you here. So please feel free to start your presentation, okay?
Okay, thank you very much, and apologies for connecting late. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna, this is very similar to a talk I gave at the LSST and Chile symposium. Wanted to try to give some background to things we are doing, particularly as part of the STARS Milky Way and local volume science collaboration to prepare for that science with LSST, and you know, encourage anyone who is interested in this kind of science to get in touch with people in the collaboration and get in touch with me if they would like. So just to give a little bit of background, when the science case for LSST was being planned, we put together a thing called the LSST Design Reference Mission. This was led by Michael Strauss, and identified the structure of our Milky Way as one of the 4 pillars of the LSST science case, and it's what helped design the LSST telescope and the survey. And in particular, focused on 2 questions. So one, what is the structure and accretion history of the Milky Way? And the second one, what are the fundamental properties of all stars in the solar neighborhood, so within 200 parsecs of the sun? The idea behind these questions was that you know, there were many exciting results showing evidence of accretion in the halo of our galaxy, and this is a question that we very much wanted to explore further. And also exciting results about the solar neighborhood and the full range of stellar populations that you can detect when you get out to 200 parsecs and down to the very faintest stars that you can observe, that we thought can hold some very interesting areas for discovery. So since that design reference mission, the science collaborations put together the LSST science book, which was which really expanded the number of science cases that LSST can address in great detail. I'm not going to go through all of those here, just to point out that while those initial 2 sort of big questions remain of strong interest, there are lots of other science cases that have been put forward that one can work on with LSST data once it becomes available. So out of the science book activity, the number of scientists organized into a STARS Milky Way and local volume collaboration. The website is here on the slide. Current co-chairs are John Gizis, Nitya Clavallo, and John Bachansky. And the way this collaboration is organized, there is a broader collaboration and then a number of subgroups, so working groups and leads for those working groups. One of them is the Magellanic Clouds, which I am the lead for. And for anyone interested in Magellanic Cloud science, I encourage you to get in touch with me. There are a number of other working groups as well, and these don't cover all of the science that we imagine doing with LSST. The idea is that these working groups should reflect what the collaboration is actively working on. And if there is something missing from this list, then others are welcome to join the collaboration to propose new working groups and take the lead on organizing those, so that this list of working groups can evolve as interest either rises or fades in various areas of science. So because I'm the lead of the Magellanic Clouds working group within the science collaboration, I'd like to focus a bit on why you would be interested in the Magellanic Clouds with LSST. So here is an image and on the top showing sort of in a cartoon way the Milky Way plane on top of an H1 image of the sky, which shows the Magellanic Clouds, large Magellanic Cloud and the small Magellanic Cloud, and the Magellanic Stream that trails behind it, and the leading arm that leads the system. These stretch over roughly 200 degrees of sky. Milky Way plane crosses here. With the Dark Energy Survey and with the SMASH survey, we are looking for basically stellar debris that comes from this interaction and should be associated with the interaction that produced the leading arm. This is a simulation from Gertina Besla et al., which through a direct collision between the small Magellanic Cloud and the large Magellanic Cloud about 300 million years ago, is able to reproduce the H1 features that you see here, but it also produces a stream of stars, particularly dense in the leading arm area. And this is the debris that we're looking for with SMASH, and is also being probed with the Dark Energy Survey. So that's one motivation for doing it. Another motivation is that from the Dark Energy Survey, as many of you know, Keith Bechtel et al. And Sergei Kopasov et al. Discovered many dwarf galaxies in the Dark Energy Survey. This is from an image of their press release. Many of these are thought to be associated with the Magellanic Clouds themselves. And so while we for now a couple of decades have been puzzling over the small number of dwarf satellites in the Milky Way halo, when you compare it to predictions from dark matter simulations, the missing satellite problem, the number of satellites is growing, and so maybe that problem is starting to go away. But we're getting now a new interesting place for discovery, in that the satellite systems of the Milky Way seem to have satellite systems of their own. And so we're probing the substructure that is traced by dwarf galaxies in greater detail than before, and perhaps revealing interesting things about the nature of dark matter. Another reason to look at the Magellanic Clouds is that they are used as laboratories for lots of astrophysical phenomena, and particularly time variable phenomena. This is from a a paper by Armin Rest et al., where we were using the Super Macho survey to try to detect microlensing events in the Large Magellanic Cloud. So using the Large Magellanic Cloud as a source of background stars to find microlensing of compact objects in the galactic halo. Well, we didn't find very many secure microlensing events. We did find a number of interesting sort of moving nebulous features that when we detected all of them and traced their apparent motions back to common centers, of course, we discovered the light echoes associated with supernova 1987A quite clearly. We also found light echoes from supernova explosions that happened hundreds of years ago. So these were type 1A explosions that from the light echoes you can trace back to the locations of the supernova remnants from which you can identify the type of supernova that blew up. But we're seeing the original light basically from these supernovae. And so you can use that light to do things like take spectroscopy and study supernovae that have long since exploded. And so using the LMC in this case as a laboratory to study this kind of phenomena is something that could be very exciting with LSST. So what are the ways in which sort of Milky Way science can benefit from LSST? So the LSST survey has a number of features. One is that it goes quite deep, right? So the single exposure depth of LSST is 24th magnitude, roughly, and in stacked depth it will go to in excess of 27th magnitude over most of the visible southern sky. And when you look at, so this is from data from the SMASH survey that shows that if you want to detect the signatures of stellar populations that have very low surface brightness, you need to go quite deep. So this is a color magnitude diagram from SMASH at a distance of 21 degrees from the center of the LMC that shows an old main sequence signature that we interpret to be part of the LMC out to 21 degrees. You can also see a signature of the Monoceros ring here in the galaxy and the foreground galaxy itself. And so these are at magnitudes at which the LSST depth will really exceed a lot of the data that we have now, and we can trace these structures, I think, with much higher fidelity than would be possible currently. And of course, with the dark energy survey and SMASH, we're only probing a portion of the southern sky. Another reason that LSST really benefits this science is because it's a very wide survey. So this is a very nice image from Anja van der Linden of the Cerro Tololo Inter-American Observatory. Here's the 4-meter Milky Way galaxy. I'm going to focus here on the SMC. And when you take dark energy camera images of the SMC, you get almost the whole main body of the SMC in one shot. LSST will be quite a bit wider, and so any given image from LSST will really contain an immense amount of data. And of course, this is a big data management problem, but that's part of the construction of the survey. And another way in which LSST will benefit the science is that it will has a cadence that allows it to detect variables all over the sky. this is from a paper by Buber et al. Using the detection of our Lyrae from Gaia associated with the Magellanic Clouds, and basically measuring substructure that we can associate with the Magellanic Clouds and also with streams in the galaxy. Now, LSST will be able to detect stars like this out to much larger distances, and also use different kinds of variables to try to map out this kind of substructure with higher fidelity. When you combine those features of the LSST survey, so you get a wide, a fast, and a deep survey. Right now, our view of substructure in the galaxy was very much shaped by Sloan, and now by the beautiful images that came out of the dark energy survey, showing another 11 streams associated with that. When we compare that to what LSST will deliver, right? So this is roughly the volume that was probed by Sloan. With LSST, we can use main sequence turnoff stars as tracers of substructure out to roughly 200 kiloparsecs, and our Lyrae as tracers of substructure out to 400 kiloparsecs. And so the volume of potential discovery in the LSST survey is simply massive. You can just imagine the kinds of substructures and objects that we can discover in this giant volume. I should maybe just pause here to say that if anyone has questions at any time during this talk, I'm happy to be interrupted. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. So, another way in that we can use LSST data, right, to benefit Milky Way science and Magellanic Cloud sciences in particular, is that we'll get proper motions down to the faint magnitude limit of the single epoch survey, and you can imagine combining multiple epochs to go still deeper than the 24th magnitude limit. And so for example, the measurement by Knut et al. Of the Magellanic Clouds using HST really has changed our view of the interaction of the clouds. The orbit that is suggested by the proper motion measurement that they have performed suggests that the Magellanic Clouds are on either first infall or are in a highly elongated orbit that has only taken them by the galaxy a couple of times in their orbital history. And of course, this leads to reinterpretation of much of the structure that we associate with the Magellanic Clouds. We'll also be able to measure parallaxes. So, of course, the Gaia satellite will dramatically change the way we view our galaxy, but it won't be the absolute last story, right? So this is a simulation of what LSST could see within a 200 parsec volume, for which it delivers 10% parallaxes down to about 24th magnitude. Now this is not in the bands that LSST will observe, but a simulation of the stellar populations that you would see within that volume. So this is going from the younger stars on the upper main sequence, older stars on the red giant branch, and the lower main sequence itself down to substellar masses and brown dwarf territory, and then a large number of white dwarfs that are the end products of stellar evolution of many of these stars. When you add in the expected errors in parallax and put in the rough LSST saturation limit of something like 17.5 magnitudes, and compare that to the Gaia limit. So Gaia will be basically able to measure the structure within the solar neighborhood for many of the stars that we see, but not all of them. So the faint end of the white dwarf luminosity function and the substellar masses, so the brown dwarfs and the really cool dwarfs, is in LSST territory. We'll be able to detect those with parallaxes and get distances to them. So there are a number of challenges that come with using this data. So one of these challenges, I think, faces all deep surveys that are trying to understand galactic structure is star-galaxy separation. Right, so this is from a figure that was presented by Heidi Newberg at a workshop that we had here in Tucson just a few months ago, using data from Subaru Hypersubprime Cam and using that data to look for structure and dwarf galaxies in the Milky Way halo. There's a big problem in that the number of background galaxies that you get as you go deeper in magnitude rises quite rapidly, and if you're looking for low surface brightness structures using faint tracers in this sea of galaxies, then that's a big noise source. And so star-galaxy separation is quite critical. This simulation here shows that, just misclassifying galaxies from shallower data based on this deeper data, it becomes a giant source of noise. This was presented by Sergei Kopasov at the same Dwarf Companions workshop, and shows also that the rate of increase of the number of background galaxies that you get with magnitude at the magnitudes that we are interested here goes faster than the typical stellar populations that we're looking for. And so coming up with different measures of star-galaxy separation is really important. This is his analysis based on dark energy survey data. Another challenge that LSST faces is that a number of the areas that LSST will observe, in particular the galactic plane and the main bodies of the Magellanic Clouds, and areas just out of the plane and outside of the clouds, will be quite crowded. The LSST photometric pipeline so far has mainly been designed really to work in the lower density areas of the survey, where you need to be able to measure precise photometry of galaxies of all kinds of different shapes as well as stars. But when you get into areas like the galactic plane, so here is a cutout from the DECCAM plane survey from Eddie Schlafly et al. Just shows the enormous density of stars that we will encounter, and the current pipeline as produced by LSST will basically treat all of these sources as one giant group of sources, and it will be impossible to process. And so a challenge is to make some sort of smooth transition between the current pipeline and a crowded field optimized pipeline as you go into these regions, and that's an area of continuing work. This is showing what you can do in these crowded regions, so why would you even want to do this? There are implications for how you observe the fields with LSST as well, right? So in these crowded regions, it's going to depend quite strongly on seeing that the data is taken under. So that these are metric figures from Will Clarkson et al. Showing confusion depth as a function of seeing, and you really want to get to the best seeing. So this informs the LSST observing cadence. And this plot over here, while you quite quickly hit the confusion limit in areas of the galactic plane, one way to use these observations is also to look for variables. And so this is an image from Abi Saha, where he's using our Lyrae stars that you detect towards the fields in the galactic bulge to measure the three-dimensional reddening distribution and correct for the reddening along the line of sight, which then gets you a much cleaner view of the stellar populations towards the galactic center. And of course, the higher the density of variable sources that you have, the better you can do that correction. And so the better you can then understand the central parts of the galaxy. So this is, one motivation for getting into the plane in these very crowded regions. Another challenge is, so the observing cadence of LSST, so deciding exactly what that is going to be. In rough terms, the LSST as a 10-year survey has a fixed number of observations that it will take in any part of the sky, but exactly how those are distributed can have great effect on the kinds of science that you can do. And so one place to get involved in determining the cadence is to contribute to this observing strategy white paper. This was the first version of this has been published on the archive. This is an open paper, so you can contribute to this by visiting this link on GitHub. The idea is to develop the science cases, metrics for those science cases, and distill those metrics into figures of merit that can then give you a single number for what a given LSST observing cadence will deliver for that science. So for some example metrics that are appropriate for Milky Way science, we've been looking at the co-added depth of the survey, the number of visits, and the spacing of visits, which is important for the detection of variable stars, as well as the confusion depth, which depends on the seeing for which the data was taken. And then we can distill those into things like surface brightness limits for streams and dwarf galaxies and structure in the halo, the number of detected objects like dwarf galaxies, variables, or transients that you might see, as well as the proper motion, and you might have said here, the parallax accuracy that you get. So this is an ongoing piece of work, and we invite contributions to it. We are going to be responding to a call for mini surveys, so as part of the Magellanic Clouds subgroup. So the main LSST survey is known as Wide, Fast, Deep, and covers much of the southern sky with reduced coverage of the galactic plane, the south celestial pole, and the north ecliptic plane. But something like 10% of the time is reserved for basically other kinds of surveys that fall outside of that main Wide, Fast, Deep survey. There will be there's a call out for developing these mini surveys that should come out a little bit later this year. And one thing that we'd like to propose for doing Magellanic Cloud science is to cover the south celestial cap part of the sky, which includes the Magellanic Clouds and a lot of the substructure around them, to sufficient depth to detect that substructure, as well as to do deep drilling surveys of the main bodies of the clouds themselves over something like 250 square degrees to detect variables and use those both as templates and for scientific discoveries in their own right. So if you're interested in contributing to this effort, I invite you to get in touch with me. So these proposals for mini surveys can basically take advantage of a couple of features, right? I mean, you can go for deeper, for co-added science, so basically static measurements from deep co-ads. You can go for single epochs. You can have many fields or selected fields. And the science cases that we have laid out here for the Magellanic Cloud mini survey basically cover all of these areas, and will feed into the white paper that we will produce. Okay, so I just wanted to give a few words on how we are trying to prepare for LSST. So one thing is to basically get organized and get together and talk about what the issues that face us as scientists for using LSST are, and design a plan for addressing them. So I attended the LSST in Chile meeting in December of last year, and that's a very good place to start. It's a place for people who are interested in LSST science of all different kinds of scientific interests to get together and start getting their feet wet. I think that once you have gotten interested, having smaller topical meetings can take that planning much further. And so an example of this was a meeting that we held in October here in Tucson. I think I mentioned it previously, on the search for dwarf companions to the Milky Way and beyond in the era of LSST. This was a proposal for a workshop that we received funding for through the LSST Corporation, which has its mission to enable science with LSST. And with co-sponsorship from NOAO, we invited a number of people from the US, Europe, and South America, and other places to come and discuss basically the dwarf galaxy detection and science problem in the LSST era. And made great progress, I think, in laying out what the main issues will be for when we have LSST data, and putting together a plan for solving them. We have a draft report from that meeting ready now, and it should appear on the archive fairly soon. It just has to go through one final round of editing. So highly encourage either attending these kinds of workshops as they come up, or organizing one yourselves if in order to address the scientific needs that you will have with LSST. Yeah, and I think some lessons that we learned from organizing this workshop is that they help to basically provide an organized discussion. And we found it very helpful to have most of the time, devoted to discussion rather than on talks delivered by audience members, because there are so many topics to discuss. Theoretical aspects, observational aspects of the data products, various scientific challenges that came up, the observing cadence, follow-up of discoveries made in LSST, etc. And discussion really was the best way to approach those issues. We took the approach of basically inviting, all of the participants were invited, and we gave them work to do, and that was very successful. We took a lot of notes, and we have a report that, like I said, will be delivered soon. Just as a summary of some of the output that came from that that workshop, we identified what LSST will give. I think these are things that I mentioned on previous slides as being quite important for Milky Way science, the theoretical interests that we have, and then how the observations and the theory sort of mesh together to give you a plan for what we'd like to do with dwarf galaxies for LSST science. Okay, so another way in which you can get prepared for LSST is to use existing data sets. I'm going to show this movie here. This is a movie of basically the contents of the NOAO Science Archive from mosaic images and then later from the dark energy camera over time, starting in 2004 when we turned on the archive. You notice that around 2012, when the dark energy camera is commissioned, the area that is covered on the sky grows extremely quickly, and we've this was as of last October, we've covered almost 3/4 of the sky with data from a variety of surveys like the Dark Energy Survey and the DESI targeting surveys, but also just from PI-led programs using Dark Energy Camera and Mosaic. And all of this, a lot of this data has catalogs associated with them. So one can use this data to basically address some of those challenging questions that LSST will pose for Milky Way related science. For instance, if you take this data set and overplot the locations of known dwarfs, many of these were discovered by Sloan, many more discovered by the Dark Energy Survey. You can tell that they're, while the dwarfs, cover a lot of the sky, there are many areas on the sky where dwarfs could remain to be found. And so one thing that came out of this workshop is that we want to use this data and catalogs associated with it to search for new companions. Right, and so this is where the project that Jaderson mentioned I'm the team leader of, the NOAO Data Lab, can help. Right, so before Dark Energy Camera came on, we didn't really have a strong motivation within NOAO to develop basically a platform that would allow you to explore both pixel and catalog data. But now with all of these massive catalogs coming and LSST on the horizon, we think this is a very important thing to get into. And so we've developed the NOAO Data Lab. The goal is to try to enable as efficient exploration and analysis as possible of these large pixel data sets and the catalogs that come from them. Basically using an approach where we provide the data on our servers, both the catalogs and the pixels. You allow people to discover the data that they want to use for their scientific purpose, and then by interacting with it, develop an intuition for how they can make a scientific discovery out of it, and then have resources to allow the automation of analysis to basically make discoveries over the entire data set once that intuition has been developed. And so this is an image of our current catalog holdings that are available through the data lab. We have legacy surveys. These are the DESI targeting surveys. DR6 is being ingested now, so this will soon include more data. We have fields from the SMASH survey here. We have the dark energy survey. And all told, roughly about 1 billion objects available from just these catalogs. We also have a project that is now, the object catalog is now available through the data lab. That is the NOAO source catalog. It's a nearly all sky catalog. Basically aperture photometry of the public imaging across the sky that we have available in our archive. Something like 2 billion objects, 20 to 30 billion individual measurements, which the individual epochs we don't yet have available in the database, but the object catalog is available. So using the data lab, you can get at that data in various ways. Here is basically a selection of things that you can do through the data lab and the ways in which you can do them. So we have various tools for exploring the sky, for becoming an authenticated user, which gives you access to resources on our servers, to do catalog queries, to do image queries, to store results from queries, to transfer files between local computing and our servers, and to do analysis. So an example of such analysis, which kind of blends everything together, is one of the challenges that mentioned that we face with LSST is to do star-galaxy separation. Well, here's a Jupyter notebook put together by Stephanie Junot. She talked about this at an earlier webinar. Basically, you can log into the data lab, the notebook server, put together a query. In this case, this was querying our database for decals DR3 photometry and joining it with all Ys, and then visualizing the color diagrams that come out of that query by type. So Tractor basically models all of the objects that it detects in the images with various models, and these are selecting the kinds of models that best fit particular objects. And you can see that the PSF model picks out the stellar locus, whereas different galaxy profiles pick out different parts of that color diagram. Then once you've settled on sort of areas to explore, you can get image cutouts of the selected objects. Here, from a couple of hack sessions that we did with the data lab, we had students who put together, basically did a join against SDSS DR13, the spectroscopic catalog, to do verification, and can use that as a training set for machine learning classification to improve star-galaxy separation. This is a confusion matrix from a hack that Jan-Turge Schindler put together as one of our hack sessions. And then you could take that classification and apply it to new objects and start doing star-galaxy separation with a machine learning approach. Another demonstration of what you can do in the data lab is, this is from a Jupyter notebook that Robert Nikuta and I put together using the SMASH dataset. So this basically make a query of SMASH for blue point-like objects, and then take the distribution that comes back and filter it spatially. And here you see that there's a couple of overdensities that you see. For a field like this, we can run automatic peak detection. So you pick out these peaks, You then go and get image cutouts at the locations of these peaks, and then one of these turns out to be the background galaxy cluster. The other peak turned out to be the Hydra 2 dwarf galaxy and SMASH, and you can see that stellar sequence here from the Hydra 2 dwarf compared to that of the background galaxy cluster. The idea here, so in this case, we knew that there was a dwarf galaxy in this field, but you could take this query and cut up the sky, query each part, run the automatic peak detection, and retrieve results for candidates, and basically store those results on the storage on our servers, and then download it after the fact. So this is a way to basically do automated dwarf galaxy detection across the sky. Encourage people to start using the data lab to do LSST preparatory science. Get to our website here. Should have put HTTPS in front of that, datalab.noao.edu. We have a help desk, an email exploder, a GitHub repository for our public client code, as well as you can follow us on Twitter. So I'm just going to summarize, I think, what I've talked about. So I think it's pretty clear that LSST will have a quite profound effect on Milky Way science, and Magellanic Clouds is one aspect that I'm particularly excited about. We have science collaborations that are organizing to do this work, as well as science collaborations for lots of other science topics, but there's lots of room for growth because the number of things that one can do with the LSST data once it comes, and the amount of preparation that has to be done in order to do it, is more work than anyone can handle, and so we encourage participation in this. Highly recommend organizing small topical meetings to help both just getting the people together and laying out the work and planning the work that needs to be done to prepare. Also to work with existing survey data, which of course we're swimming in now with DCAM, with Gaia, with the VISTA surveys, all sorts of data sets out there that can help you prepare for LSST. And I advertised the NOAO Data Lab as a science platform. Of course, there are other science platforms. Linnea has a science platform built around the dark energy survey. NCSA, Space Telescope is developing science platforms. There are a lot of science platforms that I think are pointing to the way that people will work with LSST data once it's available. Encourage you to try it out or any of the other science platforms. So that's all I have, and thank you very much, and I hope there are some questions. And sorry again for being late.
Okay, so thank you, Knut Olsen, for your great presentation. So we have time for a couple of questions. So in the audience, do we have questions?
Yeah, hi Knut, this is Basilio Santiago. Thanks very much for giving us this this update on LSST. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so my question first will be on the collaboration side of things. I'm in the Brazilian participation group for LSST, and after some struggle and a lot of help from Nitya, I managed to join the LSST community.org site, and also the LSSTC Slack. So my question is, so this only happened by January, a little bit, about 2 months ago. And I haven't really done much with it, but I see there's some action going on. I get summaries by email. But is this where really the action takes place, in the Slack and the community site? For instance, in DES, we usually have telecons. Do they happen either collaboration-wide or in the Milky Way volume collaboration, or within the specific working groups within this collaboration? How does that work?
Yeah, so there are, for Stars, Milky Way, and Local Volume, we do have collaboration-wide telecons. They've been a little irregular, I would say. The Milky Way or the Magellanic Clouds group, we haven't had a telecon for a long time. But I think where the action is happening are in places like, this Dwarf Companions meeting that we organized was, organized with a lot of the Stars, Milky Way, local volume science in mind. I think topical meetings are a really good way to kickstart the activity and to I think re-inject energy into the in our case the Stars, Milky Way local volume collaboration. I think without having the in-person meetings, the online activity tends to have some spikes and then decrease in frequency. And so I think identifying in person with a significant group of people problems that need to be worked on in order to get ready for LSST, that is the best way to do it. The same thing happened around the Observing Cadence white paper. I think if it had only been an online initiative, it probably wouldn't have gotten off the ground as well as it did. It was really the LSST project and community workshops there that kickstarted that activity.
Fine, that's okay, having these meetings sort of focused on specific objects and getting people together. Are they advertised, by which means are they advertised within the Milky Way local volume collaboration? And are remote participations possible in these, for instance, in this October meeting that you held on dwarfs?
Yeah, so at the October meeting, we did have remote participants, not very many, and for that particular meeting, we advertised, somewhat, but we wanted to keep it to a relatively small group of people in order to have a good discussion. Now, I think we want to have a follow-up to that meeting, and I think would invite people to get involved in helping to organize it, and we'll make sure to, once we do have a follow-up, to advertise it more broadly to the LSST science community so that we can have a broader range of participation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fine. Thanks.
Okay.
So do we have other questions? Actually, I do have a curiosity. So you showed that at NOAO Data Lab, you have a pipeline for auto-detecting overdensities, right?
Yeah, it was done within a notebook. We actually we used basically a library from the AstroPy module to do the detection. So it wasn't anything particularly fancy. That I think that, for that example, we were I think in this case the detection doesn't require something particularly fancy because we've already done the spatial filtering, and you only have a few peaks in a given part of the sky to try to detect automatically. But yeah, it was meant as an example to show how you could string you know, a workflow together and then automate it over a large data set.
Oh, okay. So have you estimated how many satellites or dwarf galaxies will be discovered with LSST, and how this is related with the missing satellite problem?
Yeah, that's a good question that I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I have a plot in mind, but I don't remember the numbers off of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have other questions?
So if I'm interested in brown dwarfs, Knut, I presumably think that I should join this solar neighborhood
Yes.
working group within the Milky Way collaboration. So do you know if they have the same type of approach to collaboration as you guys do, relatively few telecons? Do they use this Slack, and what do you know about them, so that I can, I'm still feeling a little bit lost about how to you know, get in touch.
Yeah. So I mean, I think what the stars Milky Way and collaboration, local volume collaboration really needs right now is people who will try to organize discussions and start pushing some of the preparatory work forward, because it has been, I think, collaboration wide fairly quiet for a while, and so
Okay.
I think jumping in and proposing and volunteering to do stuff would be really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we don't have any other questions. So if we have questions, can we get in touch with you, Knut Olsen?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. So thank you for your participation.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
so thank you very much. And thank you everyone for attending. So now I will ask everybody to say thank you to Knut Olsen. So
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for attending. See you next week. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.